Hi friends, this is Krish the Urban Naxal. Friends, when I talked about midlife crisis and how I crashed my own business in the grip of that midlife crisis, it resonated with a lot of people. And a lot of people called me back, etc. And we had conversations about it. I'm going to go a bit on the same theme. Earlier, I had spoken in Hindi. I'm going to speak in English this time because a lot of South Indian friends don't understand Hindi as well as the rest of India. So, here's the thing. We don't have a steady upward graph in life. And this is something everybody should have found out by the time they are 30, 35, 40. Life was supposed to be one thing. When you were studying, they said, "Arey 10th ke baad beta highway hai. You just perform well in 10th and life gets easy after that." It doesn't. You say, "Okay, do it till 12th standard, life will get easy after that." No, it doesn't. Then they say, "Okay, keep going, get a job, you will be better. You start climbing the career ladder." Yeah, you start doing that, but life doesn't get any easier. And you keep going, you keep climbing that ladder, you get married, you have kids. Life doesn't get any easier. It just keeps getting more and more complicated. You may have a steady job, you may have a good job, you may have a good career, you may have a good business. That business may be going good. That business may be relatively stable. You may have a bunch of clients. Those clients may even be paying you well and paying you regularly and releasing your payments without difficulty. So you would say, no problem, right? Everything's going smoothly. No. Because the rough weather isn't what happens outside. It is what happens in here and what happens in here. You run into rough weather. You start experiencing a kind of adolescence when you get into your 40s. Some of us do. Maybe many of us don't. You experience emotional turbulence. You may experience pressure from all sides. You feel pressured by your family. You feel pressured by your bosses. You feel pressured by people working under you. You feel pressured by the people, the clients and people outside the organization who are dealing with you or whom you are dealing with. You feel pressured all the time. Your general feeling is, I can't be myself. Now, I don't know how many of us have put it into words or just generally felt very angry without putting it into words, like have a rage. I may look like a very sorted guy, but no, I'm not sorted. Okay? Frank admission, I can be a ball of rage. I can get angry and scream and shout and punch at walls. I don't usually punch at human beings, but I do punch at a lot of hard stuff. I punch at walls, I punch at doors, I get really wild, I go crazy. I have broken glass top tables, I have broken through a lot of stuff. I get crazy when that happens. I feel bottled up, I feel surrounded on all sides. Is that midlife crisis? Yeah, but then again, it's not like I haven't done it in the last 5 years. I've done it in the last 5 years as well. So, rage, uncontrollable rage uncontrollable is the wrong word, but rage that you want to give vent to. Rage and sadness and frustration, even when things are going quite well. You got to look at it. Now you may say, "Oh, you're depressed. Go get yourself a psychiatrist or talk to a counselor." I don't think it is that easy. I really don't think it is that easy, and I have a bunch of things I want to say about counselors. I think, sorry to say, but sometimes I get this feeling that they are more parasitic. They are parasitic and they are going to make things worse for you. They are not going to improve matters for you. But anyway, I don't want to dish them all because I haven't tried them a lot, tried them a little. Drug therapies, I would not advise it. I would not advise changing the chemistry of your brain. In case of some people, maybe that's necessary. I don't know. I'm sure there are people whose brain needs to be altered chemically to bring them within control, to let them have a stable life. But anyway, back to the point. See guys, we go through not one but two, maybe even more than two adolescent stages, or some of us may just be adolescent all our lives. So what is it I'm talking about? There is discontentment. When you go from childhood, for me childhood was never a period of great pleasure and happiness and playing, carefree playing and all that. There was a lot of carefree play. There was a lot of roaming around. There was more roaming around and more playing and than most kids have nowadays. I have wandered several kilometers away from my house and nobody in my mom and dad never gave a fuck. I used to wander really far. I used to go out with other kids and wander really, really far. And we used to do things like climbing trees and crossing railway tracks and putting coins under, on the railway track so that they got crushed, and we did all sorts of stuff. We threw stones at each other, we threw each other into sand, we wrestled in the sand, we did a lot of stuff. So I have had a decent childhood. I've had a childhood that was also full of anxiety, a lot of bottled up feelings of being judged. Basically, I hated being judged. I hated it when adults asked, Acha, which standard are you in? And my mom says, tell them. So I say, 7th standard. And then the next question, I dreaded it, I hated it. How many marks did you get? Or did you get good marks? Oh, fuck you, man. Why are you concerned with my marks? Just let me be. But then my mother would say, he got first class. I used to just manage 60%. He got first class. Things like that. I used to flunk a couple of subjects, Hindi mainly. I didn't like talking about it. I just didn't want them to judge me on that. So kids I don't know about you, some of you have been super successful maybe. There are a lot of people who are super successful and they give the rest of us an inferiority complex. The kids who were super successful in class, I wasn't happy talking about them to my parents. Because they would say, oh, Mahesh, bring his report card. Bring Mahesh's report card so that I can compare your report card with Mahesh's report card. Fuck, man. I am me and Mahesh is Mahesh. Don't compare. But, well, that's life. That's the world. That's how parents do things. You go home with your report card, you expect to get a scolding. And there was a lot of anxiety around that. And I grew up. And I managed to kind of let go of anxiety. One of the things I did was, when I was a kid, I used to have this mental dialogue going on and on in my brain. I used to always think about how to justify myself to my parents. Like if I'm 15 minutes late from school, I used to come home on a bicycle. Or half an hour late coming home from school. At first I used to try to justify those 15 minutes or half an hour coming late. But nobody was asking. I was saying I did this, I did that, and teacher told me to stay after school, and she told me math problems, and I would construct these very elaborate lies. Nobody wanted to know those lies. Most of the time, nobody cared. Mom didn't ask, dad didn't ask. So you are here. Okay, fine. You are late. Okay, fine. That's how it went, usually. But for a long time, I used to construct these lies. And it used to give me a lot of stress. Until one day I said, fuck all this. I don't want to do that. There was this voice inside my head, kind of a thing. I don't know, some of you may have it. You may understand what I'm talking about. A voice inside your head playing, so you got two voices. One is the one justifying and the other one is the one asking for justifications. So I had these two voices inside my head. The one asking for justifications was not my mom and dad. It was just a voice asking for justifications, asking me to justify myself for anything that I did, anything that I said. And one day when I was studying for 10th, I was sitting on the terrace. It was a super bright afternoon. The sunshine was so bright I couldn't read the letters of the book. I had to squint my eyes to read the letters. I was sitting on the terrace in that hot afternoon, hot blazing afternoon, sitting next to the water tank of our tenement. Tenement is like a villa. It's on the ground floor. And suddenly I had this thought and it came to me like a flash. I said, wait a minute. Why have I been justifying? Who have I been justifying to? My parents never asked for justifications. Who the fuck is this voice? Who's this voice inside my head? I don't like it. Making my life miserable, giving me anxiety all the time. And I still remember standing on the staircase, coming down from the terrace to the ground floor, the back of our house. And I suddenly remember, I made that decision. I said, fuck this voice, man. I don't want to justify myself to you. And simultaneously with that, there was another thing. I used to have to maintain an image before everybody of a serious guy. Of a serious guy who took life seriously. And my nickname in school was professor, so something like that. I said, fuck this. I'm not a professor here, I'm a joker. I just like to do stuff. I like to do things. I don't want to justify myself to anybody. I don't have to justify myself to anybody. Not even to my parents, for that matter. And I shut up that voice. Bam! I just closed the lid on it. I closed that lid. That internal dialogue stopped. Silence. Beautiful, comfortable, permanent silence. I still have that silence. I never lost that silence. So this for me was like a huge relief. And after that I went on to have a pretty decent adolescent life. I went to college. I liberated myself. I became an extrovert. Earlier I used to be an introvert. I used to always inside myself. I went out, I met people, I used to shake hands, I used to go out there and greet people and say, hi, I'm Krish. I used to meet just any stranger in college and I would introduce myself to him if I felt like it. So I did a lot of that. I still had a lot of inhibitions about girls. I had a lot of inhibitions around girls. And again, that was coming from my parents, my mom. If I ever talked with a girl, she kind of made me very conscious that I was talking with a girl and that I had an interest in that girl. And I got super conscious. So even in her absence, I would be very conscious. Even if she was not there anywhere on the scene, I was very, very self-conscious, very uncomfortable. And so my interactions with girls were very uncomfortable. And they were uncomfortable not because of any external factors. Whatever mom was, she wasn't going to be there all the time. It was uncomfortable because what was in here, my software, was fucked up. Anyway, so my adolescence, I finished college. I was a journalist. I started out as a journalist. I had learned journalism from home. My dad and mom were journalists. My childhood was watching journalists at work. Tagging along with them all the time. I used to spend entire afternoons at my dad's office watching the teleprinter, news coming in and how the news was processed. And so I learned journalism right in my childhood. So by the time I came out of college, I had already finished writing some beautiful, big investigative articles for which I toured. I toured in Gujarat, South Gujarat, and took photographers and interviewed them. I even did a couple of political stories, cornered chief minister, cornered home minister before I was even out of college. Like I was barely 20 and I was posing like I was a 30-year-old. I was pretty good at that. I had a beard, I had hair that all of my body structure made me look like I was 30. And I could pull it off. And I did pull it off. And I wrote about a lot of stuff. Now, coming out of that, I had expectations of myself to be a guy, a social change agent. Why? Well, it's kind of something I inherited from my mom. Like, you're going to be great. You gotta do something great. So my mother would always say, General Timmayya, General Karyappa. She's from Bangalore, so she'll talk about these guys, stories of heroism. And you're going to be a general or you're going to be a scientist like Sir C.V. Raman. So there was that burden of greatness cast upon me. You got to be great. And then when I start journalism, I naturally try to live up to that. So I tried living up to that for some years. And then suddenly, one day, when I used to do these investigative stories, very deep stories, I used to really dig for dirt and get it. So I used to do that. And Dad was an economic journalist, and Dad used to write about development stories, about how the government is building a dam here and stuff like that. So he said, why are you always looking in the gutter? If you keep looking in the gutter, you'll always find shit. Don't look in the gutter. Try to write positive stories. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And I sort of flipped. I changed. I'm skipping over a lot of stuff over here. But I flipped. And I said, okay, fine. So I became an Economic Times journalist. I became a trainee. After doing 3-4 years of freelance work, I became a trainee in an office. I did not suit the office atmosphere. The office atmosphere did not suit me, but I learned from it. In about one year, I learned from it. I learned a lot of things from it. Give me a good background. After that, I became the editor of a magazine. Again, learned a lot from it. My boss taught me a lot about printing, taught me a lot about pagination, taught me a lot about layouts. I learned from it. All the while pretending that I knew it all. So when I was learning, I was never learning like a disciple. I was learning like a guy who knew it all. I acted like I knew it all, but I was learning. And it worked for me. And after that, I took another job. I'll tell you about that. It was a really shitty job, and it was my first encounter with outright dishonesty, outright fraud, as employed by that fraud. And I saw the fraud and I rejected the fraud. I rejected a very lucrative job. It was about 14,000 rupees per month back in it was 1994 or so. Very lucrative, earlier, I think 93 or 92. Lucrative job. I rejected it. I just said, fuck this. This guy is dishonest, he's dangerous, he's criminal, he's going to make me do criminal stuff. I'm not doing it. I came out of that job. No explanations, no nothing. After that, that was like the last time I worked for an organization as an employee. After that, I started publishing journals. And I published journals at first as a consultant, then as a printer, then as a publisher. I did the whole thing. And for several years, my wife and I did this. As I said, again, I'm skipping over a little bit. So we did this until 2005, 2006, 2007. I had this very uncomfortable thought. So till 2007, it was a sense of, I would call it Darbari journalism. What's Darbari? Well, you sing the rag that the king wants you to sing. You write poetry in in praise of the king or your employer. So I did that. Chambers of Commerce, Rotary clubs, mutual funds. I was doing that. I did that, but inside I was beginning to feel quite sick. And the economics, I'll tell you the economics part later. I already have talked about it in Hindi. So the economics were also turning against me. Till then it had been very lucrative till 2006 2007, and I felt terribly dissatisfied that I was writing stuff that someone else wanted me to write, and it was meaningless. It was completely meaningless. And we used to go for I used to, there were days where we were called to a Rotary function and felicitated. Krishnaraj Rao did a great job on our journal, blah blah blah, big bouquet. It gave me no joy at all, gave me no satisfaction at all. My wife was saying on the way back, as we drove back, Krish, I feel proud of you. And I was like, I feel ashamed of myself. I feel like a prostitute. I feel like someone's given me an award or someone's recognized me for what a great blowjob I give people. I'm a blowjobber. That's who I am. I'm a prostitute. So I didn't like it at all. And I started rejecting this because I said, I want to write meaningful stuff. I want to do meaningful. I want to do something meaningful. All this has no meaning for me. Now, I was being very disruptive. I was being disruptive with my family. And still, there was a home office setup. We were working from a home office setup. My dad was helping me. He had retired from Economic Times. He was helping me. I had a friend, close friend, who stayed and came over and stayed, and he also helped. I had an employee who used to work. So we were doing things, but the dissatisfaction was crazy. I was going nuts inside. And one day, it was like the camels, the straw that broke the camel's back. One day, my son, who was about 3 years old, I think, at that time, peered in through the curtains and said, Papa, come and play, let's play. It was around lunchtime. So he expected I'll sit with him, have lunch and play with him. And I said, not now. Then he said, Papa, again he called after 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I said, not now, I shouted. And he suddenly was shocked by the shouting and he cried. And he stood there and cried, hiding behind the curtain. Not now, Kevididu. He said, not now. And I felt a sense of disgust with myself. Because I was saying yes now to my clients. And I'm saying not now to my son. And, I'm not doing any justice to my family. So that's the point at which a break point came. I said, fuck this. Fuck this nonsense. I went inside, played with my son. And I said, now onwards, I'm going to say now to you. I'm going to play with you, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to be myself, I want to be with my family, and I'm going to say not now to my clients. And I started giving my clients attitude. I started saying, hey, not now, I'll next week, So they were quite shocked, and it's a quick way to lose your clients. And so in some years, I'd lost all my clients. I'm Krish, the Urban Naxal. Jai Maharashtra, Jai Hind.